What's up? Welcome to the Stack. Welcome back if you've been here before. I'm neonmushroom, and today we have some more EDH Commander gameplay for you guys, which is all you need to know for now. So we're going to go ahead and jump into who's playing, what decks they've decided to play, what opening hands they've decided to keep, in addition to our normal upkeep stuff.
As always, if you like this show or any of our other shows on YouTube, liking, sharing, and subscribing helps us out immensely. If you like our content and don't mind that extra mile, you can always support us over on Patreon, over at patreon.com/mtg the stack.
I've decided that making someone else do the patron this shout out counts as being creative. I need you to say thank you, Jose Francisco LeBron Jr. real quick.
Thank you, Jose Francisco LeBron Jr.
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 Comment down below any of your thoughts and feelings, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Alright, first up we have me, and I'll be playing Lathril, Blade of the Elves. This build is going to be an elf ball style build that wants to flood the board with as many elves as possible, using both cheap elves from my hand and deck, and the elves that Lathril makes when she connects, and then using all of those elves in conjunction with Lathril's activated ability to end the game by draining everybody multiple times. I'll be keeping a 7-card hand with an Elvish Guidance, a Wrap and Vigor, Elves of Deep Shadow, Gnarlroot Trapper, Deathrite Shaman, Misty Rainforest, and a Command Tower. Next up we have Ajdin playing Bruvac the Grandiloquent. This deck is built exactly like you would think you would build a deck like this. It plays a bunch of persistent petitioners and wants to aggressively mill all of its opponents out as quickly as possible. It even has some combos like Traumatize paired with Bruvac himself. Ajdin will also be keeping a 7-card hand with a persistent petitioners, that Traumatize I was just telling you about, a Pognify, 3 basic islands, and a Castle Vantress. Next up we have Foley returning to the channel, playing his partner pairing of Trynn, Champion of Freedom, and Silvar, Devourer of the Free. This is an aristocrat style build that wants to use cards like Zulaport Cutthroat in order to slowly bleed all of its opponents to death, with the added caveat that if he ever gets Angel of Glory's Rise and Fiend Hunter, he can combo kill everyone pretty much immediately. Foley is also part of the No Mulligans Club, and he keeps a 7-card hand, including a Shared Animosity, a Boros Charm, Priest of the Forgotten Gods, Draneth Magistrate, Swamp, Command Tower, and a basic mountain. Last but not least, we have Trigger playing Ruhan of the Fomori. This is not a Mardu deck, I know I'm as shocked as you are, and this is going to be a straightforward Voltron build that wants to kill all of its opponents using commander damage. Trigger is the 4th one of us to keep a 7-card hand, and that includes a Plains, a Mountain, a Sea of Clouds, a Soul Guide Lantern, a Swiftfoot Boots, SRAM Senior Edificer, and a Rhystic Study.
1, 2, 3, Bazinga. I won.
It seems like I won.
Wait.
I don't.
You're the teacher today.
I'm the teacher.
On tap, upkeep, draw for turn.
I will play a Misty Rainforest and fetch. Bop. Can anyone guess what we're gonna do? If you guess I'm gonna shock in Overgrown Tomb, you're a fucking prophet. After losing one to the fetch and shocking the Overgrown Tomb into play untapped, I'm gonna tap that Overgrown Tomb for 1 black mana and cast Deathrite Shaman. With nothing else, I'm just going to pass the turn over to Ajdin, who will draw, deploy a basic island, and then just pass the turn right over to Foley, who's going to draw and play a Command Tower. With nothing else, we'll go to Trigger's first turn. He'll play a Plains, and he'll tap it for a colorless to play Soul Guide Lantern. It triggers when it enters play, and he actually is going to exile my fetch, turning my Deathrite Shaman's ability to make mana off for the time being. But I'm going to play Wooded Foothills on my second turn, immediately fetching, dropping down to 36, and searching my library for a snow-covered forest. Then I'll tap my Overgrown Tomb for black and play Gnarlroot Trapper, and I'll tap my forest for green, and I'm going to cast Elves of Deep Shadow. After that, it's time to get some payback, so I'm going to turn my Deathrite Shaman sideways at Calvin. He'll take the damage, dropping down to 39, and I'll pass to Ajdin. Ajdin will draw for turn and deploy a 2nd basic island as land for turn. Then he's going to play Persistent Petitioners, which resolves, and we'll go to Foley's turn, where he's going to play a basic Swamp, and then tap 2 mana and cast Draneth Magistrate.
That's rude.
Okay. Satisfied, Foley will pass the turn to Trigger, so he'll draw and play a Training Center as his land for turn. Then he'll tap 2 for a SRAM, Senior Edificer, and with nothing else, he'll just pass the turn to me. So I'll draw my card and play an Ancient Tomb as my land for turn. Then I'll tap Ancient Tomb and my Overgrown Tomb, losing 2 life to the tomb. And I'll cast Elvish Guidance, enchanting my Snow-Covered Forest. Then I'll tap my Trapper for a mana, losing a life, and my Elves of Deep Shadow for a mana, losing another life, to cast Dwennan's Elite. When it enters the battlefield, it sees I have another elf, so I'm going to generate a 1/1 Elf Warrior token and pass to Ajdin, who will untap and draw his card for turn, playing a 3rd basic island. Since he can't cast his Bruvac, he'll just pass the turn to Foley, who will draw and play an unclaimed territory naming Human, and decide to leave some mana up and pass to Trigger, who untaps and draws his card for turn. He's going to play a Sea of Clouds as his land for turn, then he's going to tap for 2 mana to cast Swiftfoot Boots and trigger SRAM. Saram's trigger resolves, so he's going to draw a card, and then he's going to tap 1, trying to equip the Saram. Foley has a response, he's going to tap 2 and cast Dire Tactics to exile the Saram, and Foley controls a human, so he won't lose any life. After that, we'll move to my turn, where I'll untap, draw, and play a command tower as my land for turn. Then I'll head into combat and turn 4 of my elves sideways at trigger for a grand total of 5 damage. He cannot block it, so he drops to 34. And before I can pass the turn, Ajdin's going to Pongify the Drannith Magistrate, which is going to kill it in exchange for a 3/3 green ape. After that, Ajdin's going to tap 1 and a Persistent Petitioners to mill trigger for 1 card. Then we'll move to Ajdin's turn, where he's going to untap and draw his card for turn. In his first main phase, he'll play a 4th island, then tap for 3 and cast Bruvac, the Grandiloquent. With nothing else, he's just going to pass the turn back to Foley. Foley's going to untap, draw his card for turn, and deploy a basic mountain as his land for turn. Then he's going to tap out for 4 mana to cast one of his commanders, Trynn, Champion of the Free. He'll head into combat and use that 3/3 to attack me. I'm not going to block it, so I drop down to 29. Then at end step, he's going to make a human soldier off of Trynn, and we'll move to Trigger's turn, where he's going to play a Skycloud Expanse as his land for turn. Then he'll tap for 2 mana, and he's going to play a Talisman of Conviction. Then I'll tap for 2 more and cast a Relic Seeker.
Okay. And there's a battlefield. I would like to equip Swiftfoot Boots to Relic Seeker. Okay.
I could just rip the card up.
I could just assault you. He's bigger than you. You're gonna lose. I would.
The Relic Seeker will become equipped with the Swiftfoot Boots. He'll head into combat, and he's going to attack me with Relic Seeker. I won't block, so I drop to 27. Then he triggers the Relic Seeker. He's going to search his library for an equipment. It's going to be a Sword of Fire and Ice. He'll add it to his hand. After that, he'll try to pass to me, but first I'm going to activate my Deathrite Shaman, exiling Dire Tactics, and dealing 2 damage to each of my opponents. Then I'll untap, draw a card, and play another Snow-Covered Forest. Then I'll tap the Forest enchanted with Elvish Guidance for a bunch of green mana, in addition to a black for my command tower, and I'm going to cast Lathril, Blade of the Elves. After that, I'll head into combat, and I'm going to turn 4 of my elves sideways at trigger again for a total of 5 damage. He takes it all, and I'll try to pass, but first Ajdin has an action. He's going to use his Persistent Petitioners in conjunction with Bruvac to mill trigger for 2. Then Ajdin will draw his card for turn, and he'll play Ancient Tomb as his land for turn. Then he's going to tap a bunch of mana, 5 total, losing 2 to Ancient Tomb, to cast Traumatize, targeting Foley, and something funny is going to happen here. Half of your deck size doubled is your deck size, so he mills Foley for his entire library, and simply passes the turn, and Foley can't draw a card, so he loses the game. Then we're going to move to Trigger's turn, where he'll untap and draw a card for turn, playing a basic mountain as his land for turn. He's going to tap for 3 mana in order to cast the Sword of Fire and Ice, which does wind up resolving. Then he's going to equip it to the Relic Seeker and head into combat. He's going to turn Relic Seeker sideways at Ajdin, and he's going to take 5. That's going to trigger Sword, and he's going to try to shoot down my Deathrite Shaman. Before he can, I'll activate the Deathrite Shaman, exiling Traumatize and dealing 2 to both of my opponents. Then the Deathrite Shaman will die to the Sword, and Trigger will draw a card. After that, we'll move to my next turn, where I'll untap, draw, and play a City of Brass as my land for turn. Then I'm going to head into combat and attack Trigger with all of my creatures for a grand total of 7 damage. He has to take it and drop to 18, then I'll trigger Lathral and make 2 Elf Warriors. With nothing else, I'll try to pass to Ajdin, but first he wants to mill me for 2 using Persistent Petitioners. After that, we'll go to Ajdin's turn, where he'll draw a card and play Scavenger Grounds as his land for turn. Then I'll tap for 2 mana to play a second copy of Persistent Petitioners, and with nothing else, we'll pass back to Trigger's turn, where he'll draw a card and play a Sunhome Fortress of the Legion as his land for turn. Then I'll head into combat and turn the Relic Seeker sideways at Ajdin once again, dealing 5 damage, triggering the sword, killing my Gnarlroot Trapper, and drawing a card. Then he's going to tap for 4 mana in order to cast his commander, Ruhan of the Fomori. He'll try to equip it with the Swiftfoot Boots, which does wind up working, and with nothing else, he's going to pass to me, where I'll untap and draw my card for turn. In my first main phase, I'll play a Bloodstained Mire as my land for turn, and then I'll head into combat, attacking Trigger with my Lathral. It has Menace, so he can't block. He takes 2. I make 2 Elf Warriors, and then I'll try to pass to Ajdin, but before I can, he's going to use one of his Petitioners to mill Trigger for 2, and then I'll untap and draw his card for turn. He's going to play a Castle Vantress as his land for turn, and then he's simply going to pass the turn back to Trigger. He'll untap, draw his card, and then I'll tap for 3 mana to cast Steel of the Godhead, trying to enchant the Ruhan of the Fomori. Ajdin does have a response. He's going to tap for 3 and cast Thought Collapse. Trigger also has a response to this, so he's going to tap 3 mana of his own, and he's going to cast Counterflux. This is going to counter the Thought Collapse, the stack's going to resolve, and then Steel of the Godhead will ultimately attach itself to the Ruhan. He's going to roll to see who he has to attack. I call evens. It's odd, so he's going to attack me with Ruhan, and I'll attack Ajdin with the Relic Seeker. Now the Ruhan's going to deal 9 commander damage to me, and he's going to gain 9 life. And then Relic Seeker will deal 5 damage to Ajdin, and trigger the Sword of Fire and Ice. He's going to try to deal 2 damage to my Dwennan's Elite, and this will happen, so it's going to kill the Dwennan's Elite, and then he's going to draw a card off of the Sword of Fire and Ice. He'll try to pass to me, but first I'll fetch with the Bloodstained Mire to get a snow-covered swamp. Then I'm going to untap, and I'm going to draw my card for turn. Moving to my first main phase, I'm going to skip right through it and go to combat, attacking Trigger for 7 damage total. He takes it, that triggers Lathril, and I am going to make 2 more 1/1 Elf Warrior creature tokens. I'll play a Verdant Catacombs as my land for turn, and I will try to pass to Ajdin. He has an action. He wants to use both of his Persistent Petitioners to mill Trigger for a grand total of 4. Then Ajdin will untap, and before he draws, he's going to activate his Castle Vantress in order to scry 2 before draw step. He's going to look at the top 2 cards of his library, decide he likes both of them. He's going to rearrange the order he saw them in, so he'll draw for turn, tap for 1 blue mana, and cast a Ruin Crab. Now we do mess up here. He plays a basic island and targets Trigger to mill 6 cards. It should have been both of us because Ruin Crab says each opponent. Don't worry, it doesn't matter a whole lot in this game. He'll head to combat and attack Trigger with his Bruvac for 1 commander damage. He'll try to pass to Trigger, but he'll activate the Soul Guide Lantern and draw a card. Then he'll untap, draw his card for turn, and play a Prismatic Vista as his land for turn, immediately fetching, dropping down to 16 to get a basic Plains into play untapped. After this point, he's going to do some thinking and decide to tap for a grand total of 3 mana in order to cast Maul of the Skyclaves. This enters the battlefield and has a trigger. It's going to automatically attach itself to a creature. In this case, he's going to choose Ruhan. He'll roll a die to see who he's going to attack and combat. It's even, so this time he attacks Ajdin with both creatures. Before we can head into damage, Ajdin is unable to block, so Trigger is going to tap for a grand total of all of his mana to activate Sunhome. He wants to give Relic Seeker double strike, but in response to this, I'm going to cast Assassin's Trophy, targeting the Steel of the Godhead, and this resolves. So Trigger's going to search his library for a basic land, in this case a Plains, and put it into play untapped. Then, before we go to damage, Ajdin has some actions. He's going to mill Trigger for a grand total of 4 cards, flick him off, and then he's going to take the damage from first strike, dropping to 3. The Sword of Fire and Ice will trigger, shooting Lathral for 2, then he'll draw a card. Then he's going to try to trigger a second time, shooting the Lathral a second time. But with that on the stack, I'm going to choose to tap for 2 mana and cast Wrap in Vigor, regenerating all my creatures. This does save my Lathral from dying to the second Sword of Fire and Ice trigger. All of my creatures do become tapped from regeneration. After this point, we're going to make sure Ajdin's life total's dropped, and I'm going to fetch with my Verdant Catacombs to get a snow-covered forest. After this, I'm going to untap and draw my card for turn, and I drew a spicy one. I'm going to tap for 3 mana total, and I'm going to cast Ezuri, Renegade Leader, and move into combat.
Can I go to combat? Yeah, no, I'm dead. Attack. Yep. Pump it 3 times. Yep. Good game, sir. Got there.
We got there, we beat him down with Elf Ball. Here at the end of the game, I want to talk about how everyone's decks performed in order from the least impactful to the most impactful, is the way we've been doing it here on the channel. And it's going to be pretty straightforward today, I think, because some of the people were less impactful because they just lost to a 2-card combo. I'll start with that interaction, because some of you may have caught that Foley actually didn't necessarily die immediately. I believe this was turn 5, meaning that his library size, because he had partners, would have been odd, so he would have had 1 card left in his library, but we did confirm that even no matter what that card was, he had no way to come back into the game or combo kill us. So he wound up scooping it up there for anyone who caught that. Because, you know, there's 2 partners, that means there's 98 cards in the library. So we're going to get that out of the way. He did not impact the game a whole lot. He did use a pretty sweet removal spell on the SRAM, which probably opened the gates for me to do what I did that game. Otherwise, I could have been taken out much earlier instead of not getting taken out at all. Then we'll talk about Ajdin, and this is a little bit weird because it's really difficult to measure how well a deck that wants to mill its opponents out, how well it performed when it only wiped out 1 opponent. And when a mill deck doesn't win, it looks like what it did was just absolutely awful, unfortunately. He got his Bruvac online. He was never able to get 4 advisors out so he could start to use the persistent petitioners. And because of Bruvac, that would have people milling for 24, which means it's kind of like, I'll kill you in 4 taps, except for he has a Ruin Crab. So it's pretty easy to actually start to mill people out over the course of like 2 or 3 turns. And that's not even counting some of the other combos the deck actually plays. But other than that, he didn't do a whole lot. He did Pognify the Drannith Magistrate, which opened up me and Trigger being able to play our commanders. And we're going to get into me and Trigger now because we were the last 2 players in the game. And we'll start with Trigger because he kind of did exactly what the Ruhan deck wants to do. He played a Ruhan, and he started to equip it with a bunch of equipments, and he started to roll a die to see who's going to attack. I think the game could have gone differently if he had to hit me with both of the attacks off of Ruhan, but he didn't. I wound up living through that last attack that he did, because he had to ship everything at Ajdin, because the creature, the Relic Seeker with the Sword of Feast and Famine, not Feast and Famine, it was a Sword of Fire and Ice. Ajdin's deck was mono blue, so it would always connect, and Trigger's target for that double striking Sword of Fire and Ice was going to be my Lathral, but I had the Wrap and Vigor. He did his thing, but it wasn't good enough. His life total was low enough, although I think he could have been at 40 and I probably still could have won the game, because I got really lucky and I top decked Ezuri. For you guys who don't know how Ezuri works, you can dump a lot of mana into it. I had an Elvish Guidance, and you do that a few times and your team's gigantic, and I had like 10 elves when I swung at Calvin. There's not a whole lot to say about that. I was handless when I top decked that card, so I got like seriously lucky, but expect to see more from most of these decks, especially the Lathral deck, because I will be tuning that deck a little bit. I'm actually considering doing a total rebuild of that deck and trying to make it more of a what's the best word for it? Not really cEDH, but I want to borrow some cEDH interactions and combos for the Lathral deck, because there's some stuff I think you can get away with, because you can really lean hard on Lathral. And that's one thing I kind of want to talk about briefly, is that I didn't do very much in that game. I got a couple elves out, and then Trigger was able to start to watch the number of elves I had, because he had a Sword of Fire and Ice. He was able to start using those triggers to ping down my more meaningful elves, like my Gnarl Root Trapper, giving a creature that has Menace Death Touch is pretty powerful. And then he was able to knock out my Deathrite Shaman. And he could have kept doing it had he lived a little bit longer, and hadn't I had that Wrap and Vigor, which saved my Lathral and probably helped me win the game. But other than like the small bits of interaction I had in the Assassin's Trophy and stuff, my deck was just carried on the back of my commander's ability, which I was really impressed by. So expect to see more out of Lathral, like I was saying, and at this point, I'm probably just rambling. This is a later in the night upload if you're watching this within the first couple hours it's uploaded. So if you're one of those people that watches to the end and is paying attention to this, tomorrow, the poll's in. We did a community tab poll and a tab poll, TAB, and everyone wants to see Calvin, Trigger, build Zergo live tomorrow. I think we're going to go live around 12. Expect to see a notification. That's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I will see you next time.